Hello and welcome to No Wrong Choices. Along with Larry Shea and Tushar Saxena, I am Larry Samuels, and this is a podcast about the adventures of life, where each episode will talk to somebody who had a dream or a vision, chased after it, and either got there or got close, and they're going to share their story back with us. And this week, we're talking to a good friend of mine, talent agent Jeff Lesh, who's been in the business for decades, working for William Morris. Broke in through the legendary mailroom program, which he'll certainly dig into as we get into the conversation, but a good friend and a great storyteller. Tushar, you've spent a lot of time with Jeff over the years. Do you want to tell us a little bit about him?
I think this is a great way to start us off too. Speaking of Jeff Lesh, your good buddy, and I've known him like you said. I've only probably known Jeff for about 10 years, and I realized that after speaking to him, I really probably didn't know Jeff all that well at all. This is all about the story about how you make it and how you get to the top, and it's partly luck, it's part opportunity, and then it's part hard work as well. So I'll tell you what, I had a great time talking to Jeff. I mean, I always have a great time hanging out with Jeff and talking to him, but this was really probably one of the first times I actually had an opportunity to sit down and get to know Jeff a little bit better. That's really what I was really happy with.
Yeah, we've been bumping into Jeff at Super Bowl parties and special events for, like T said, a decade or a decade and a half. Yeah. And one of the things you always realize about Jeff is what a great storyteller he is. So what a perfect guy to bring on our program and talk about his amazing career, because he's had one. And it's about, as you said, T, it's about opportunity and then being prepared once that opportunity presents itself. And one of the things, that we're going to try to bring to our listeners on this show is how you can be prepared to enter the door as it's cracked for you. Because, if you have that opportunity and you're not prepared to follow through with it, what good is it, So we're going to bring you some entertaining stories, some interesting people, some great storytellers like Jeff. And I think it's a great way to kick it off and get the ball rolling with Jeff Lesh.
I agree. And, the other thing that's so great about things like this is sometimes wonderful opportunities either find us or we happen to stumble into them by accident. And in the case of Jeff, I think there's a little bit of both that happens here. So with that, why don't we step into the interview? Everybody, here is Jeff Lesh. Now joining the conversation is my close friend and veteran talent agent, Jeff Lesh. Thank you for joining us.
I am happy to be here, and only just to spend some time with Tushar. That's the most important thing. It really is.
That is how we feel all the time. So, Jeff, as we were sort of putting the parameters together for a show about dreamers and people figuring out their path in life and sort of going after that dream and grabbing onto it, the first person I thought of was undoubtedly you, who wakes up at 10, goes to work at noon, comes home at 3:30, takes a 2-hour lunch. Like, if anybody's living the dream and has it figured out, it's Jeff Lesh.
I can't even explain how you just completely described my schedule.
So for you, it's
you're
my baby.
You're forgetting the yoga session.
So for you, it's my baby takes the afternoon train, works from noon till 3, and then
works from noon to noon 03. I love it.
So Jeff, I guess I'll start off with the first question to you, which is, did you always want to be a talent agent?
Hell no. The answer is, I had no idea what being a talent agent was. I had limited experience with it, didn't know. I wanted to be a pharmacist.
You wanted to be a pharmacist. Why a pharmacist?
Well, my father had a pharmacy in Jersey. It was a pharmacy and liquor store. And I could have been either a drunk or a pharmacist. So I wanted to be a pharmacist. And I turned out to be the pharmacist part didn't work out. Thank you.
Clearly.
So I went to the University of Rhode Island, and I could not pass organic chemistry. So the good people at the University of Rhode Island suggested that I find something else to do with my time. You can either find another major or go to a different school. Don't come back here. So I switched to become a journalism and history major, and got some internships at local television stations, and ended up this time of year is like the perfect way of talk. This time of of years, the perfect time to talk about it, because I got a job working at the '96 Olympic Games in Atlanta for NBC.
Oh, wow.
And it was through a friend who was a friend of Larry's as well. He went to Emory. He called me and said they're desperate for people to come down and work at the Olympics. And I said, desperate? Perfect. I'm perfect for that.
When I think
So
desperate, I think Jeff Lesh.
Desperate. When you are desperate for someone, clearly because of this interview, Larry, desperate. So I got into my father's '93 Buick Century, and I drove to Atlanta that night, 15 hours. And I ended up working for NBC for the whole of the Olympics. But it wasn't just during the games. I was there for, I think, 6 or 7 weeks, with the prep and then with everything else. And I was a PA. I was, run, get me coffee, go get donuts, 1 box for the crew, 1 box for Al Roker. Al was much bigger at the time. And it was basically go pick up Mary Lou Retton at the airport. It was the craziest job. I met everybody. I was in the park when the bomb blew up.
I remember that.
I had breakfast with Richard Jewell that morning.
Wow.
If you guys remember, he was the guy who
absolutely.
He was accused of blowing it up, and we all knew he didn't do it, but it was an absolutely crazy, amazing, awesome summer.
So hold on. So let's back up to that moment, because this is the critical thing. This is what the crux of the biscuit is with this show is how did that happen? So the crux of the biscuit. So was it a phone call? Tell us about that, because that had to be the biggest break of your life in terms of your professional career right there. That phone call that drove you down to Atlanta to get this job, and then you were willing to do pretty much anything, correct?
Exactly. Okay, so the background is I didn't know anybody in the entertainment business. So I grew up. I always loved television, right? I always loved TV. I'm an insomniac, as Larry will tell you. So I was up all night watching TV. After a while, my parents gave up. I didn't have a bedtime. I would just be up watching TV all night. So it was always my favorite thing, but I didn't know someone could make a career out of it. It just never occurred to me. So when I switched majors, I was able to get this internship at the local news station on my own. But that summer, which, I didn't have anything lined up. So I figured out a way through a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, which is what everybody does, to get an internship. Do you guys remember the MTV Beach House?
Yeah, absolutely.
Of course. Sure.
Right. So I ended up getting an internship at the MTV Beach House. And my summer was going to be spent, I think it was at the Hamptons that year, just kind of being a gopher or whatever interns do at the MTV Beach House. And then our friend Craig calls me up and says, hey, he gives me the desperation phone call and says they need people and they pay. So I wasn't going to get paid for the internship. And it was with NBC at the Olympics and not MTV. I mean, I'm sure there would have been other perks. But, I'm like, yeah, why not? Let's do this. So that phone call got me right into that car, and down I went. And I mean, it was awesome. I did everything. I was at so many of the events. I met every famous person who was there. I was Bob Costas's driver. It was just awesome.
That's great.
And I didn't know anything. We get there and they hand us keys to a brand new Cadillac and a card where you can get a Coca-Cola
and a tiny little broadcaster
in Atlanta. Exactly.
That's great.
Well, the relationships.
Shay, okay?
Easy.
I mean, the relationships that you made through that experience must have been, invaluable. And knowing your story as well as I do, if I remember correctly, from there, you became a page at NBC, which must have, accelerated, your network and opened up that many more doors. Did you jump right from the Olympics to the page program?
No. So at the end of the Olympics, I became this is something that I kind of learned is always be there when someone turns around and needs something, no matter how stupid it is, and always be the first guy that someone thinks of. You want to be the person that says, oh, crap, get Larry. Yeah. Oh, crap, get Tushar. Oh, crap, get Jeff.
It's one of your best qualities, Jeff, I must say.
I had very few. So
that's a good one.
That's true. So you always want to be that guy. So I became that guy down in Atlanta. And at the end of it, they said, listen, are you going home? Do you have any plans? Short story is I got hired to work at the Democratic National Convention, which was Clinton's second nomination in Chicago. And I ended up going there, and they were launching MSNBC. So I was there when the first broadcast, and I was there when, Clinton got the nomination, balloons fall, all that. And then I had plans to go overseas for a year abroad. And they said, well, just keep in touch. And through that, I got an internship at Dateline. So my last year at school, I was barely doing any classes. And I drove down to 30 Rock, and I would, work for Dateline. And then when I graduated,
with Stone Phillips?
With Stone Phillips and Jane Paul.
Wow.
Who were very nice. They were lovely. And they were really nice to the interns, which I've learned to judge people by how nice they are to the people that are below them.
That's very interesting.
And everyone of quality I ever met was like that. They were all the people that are nice to their assistants, that are nice to the interns, and specifically nice to the pages at NBC, which I'll get to. Those were the quality people. So I graduated on a Wednesday. Thursday, I had a page interview, which I don't know if you guys know about it, but it's a really complicated program to get into. And if I didn't have these other jobs, I never would have gotten into it. I never would have heard of it.
Jeff, for context, and I don't know how many people are familiar with the program. There's so many stars, so many celebrities, so many CEOs who have come out of that program. Just name a few to give people context.
Oh God, Brandon Tartikoff, Mike Eisner, on the acting side, Regis Philbin, and more recently Aubrey Plaza from Parks and Recreation.
Wait, they were
pages. Superman was a page, if I remember correctly.
Oh my God.
Yeah, Christopher. Yeah, they were like all, but that's just like the top. It's like most of them are behind the scenes people. Like most of them just they went on to not the headline names, but the people running networks and the people doing the work of TV and film. So many of them were pages.
But it's a big deal.
I mean, everything you're talking about is relationships, right? It's like the people you knew and the things that happen along the way, right? It just seems to be a general theme in how you get from one point to another, too.
And Larry, I know Larry has this attitude, too. Like, if you were, I don't know how much I can swear on this, but if you were a jackass to people along the way, everybody remembers you as the jackass.
Yep.
But if you were cool, everybody, I know that guy, bring him in.
But interestingly, and I'll just throw this out there, you learn from those people too. Like, I'm a believer that you learn from every single experience in life. And when I look back as my time as a manager, all those horrible people that I dealt with along the way, they taught me just as much as the good people. And I'm sure you had those same experiences.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, Larry, you had well, guys, I met Larry had an internship. Did you have an internship there, Larry?
I started as an intern, and then I just, picked up every project I possibly could, similar to you, working in the studios. Eventually, I was a freelance PA, and then I was a full-time PA who was paid like a freelance PA. So I just did everything I possibly could.
Well, the reason why I say that is because Larry had this boss who will remain nameless, but he was a jerk off.
I almost fought him in a hallway. That is a true story. I really did.
Well, to be fair, it would have been a very short fight.
Yes.
Who would have won? Wait a minute.
Well, wait. Sure. It would have been two. It would have been two hits. It would have been Larry hitting him and then Larry hitting him again.
That's exactly right. This MF drove me out of NBC because I was going to kill him. I needed to do it for my own safety.
So he didn't do time. But anyway, the point going back to what Larry was saying is I learned a lot from that guy because I saw how he acted.
Yep.
I saw how he treated people. And yeah, he was really good at his primary job, but eventually you become expendable in that primary job.
Right.
And it's how you act to people is how you're judged. And good Lord.
So at what moment then, after all these experiences you've had, did you say to yourself, you know what? I really love what I'm doing here.
So,
this is the career I want to go for.
So I loved it. I was working at at the time it was Conan O'Brien's show. I was working at Rosie O'Donnell's show. I was working at Saturday Night Live. I was working at, I was at every single Saturday Night Live, 98, 97, 98, 99. I was at every one.
Wow.
And it was easily the greatest job in the world because all the women were gorgeous and all the guys looked like me, which means I looked like you guys. It was
hey,
ridiculous. Thank you. So, it was absolutely great. So I made $10 an hour, no health insurance, and we just never stopped working. And anytime anybody turned around and needed something, I would be there. And everybody wanted, basically what you do is you give tours to tourists, right? And I remember you'd have people from Wisconsin come in and you'd be reading from a script, this is where, Seinfeld is on NBC and it makes $1 million every 30 seconds for commercials. And NBC makes 95% of its money from commercials. And some yokel would always ask, well, where's the other 5% come? And I would mix it up. I'd say gambling and prostitution. and eventually they suggested that I don't do tours anymore.
Good thinking.
I was scaring the tourists from Wisconsin. So,
Oh my God.
So everybody was going. Then what you do is you apply for assignments, and you go and work for one of the shows, SNL or Conan or whatever. And I looked around and saw that the people who got hired after they were done with their Page program, because it's only a year long, all were doing behind the scenes stuff. They weren't doing the glamour spots of being down at the SNL desk and hanging out with George Clooney. They were working in marketing. They were working in PR. They were working for news. They were doing that stuff. So I took all of the non-glamour assignments. And I think it was around that time that someone came to me and said, hey, look, I know you got a little while left in your Page program, but do you want to work for news? And I took a job as a news producer. And I had, I spent the summer in Pittsburgh. I was working with Geraldo Rivera at the time. And I was a 23-year-old news producer. It was stupid that they just gave me this job.
I can't imagine what you learned from Geraldo.
I learned never. You know what I learned from him? I learned never to be in anyone's shot. Get the fuck out of the way.
Right.
And the truth doesn't really matter.
I didn't at the time, but it was mostly you could do a montage of Geraldo. You could literally do a montage with me Lesh, get out of my shot. Lesh, get out of my shot. You can literally do a montage.
I love it.
But he was a nice enough guy, and he was doing. This was before he kind of lost his mind with the right wing stuff, and he was cool. And I remember, before I forget, one of the greatest jobs I had at SNL. I don't know if you guys remember this, but in 97, 98, 99, the hottest tickets in New York were Yankees, Red Sox, the producers on Broadway with Broderick and Nathan Lane.
Nathan Lane, yeah.
Yeah, sure.
And Rosie O'Donnell's show. Rosie O'Donnell's tickets were like gold.
Really?
Gold.
Did they know she
Really?
was an asshole? Were they aware of this or no?
Well, I can get back to that later. As far as her.
Never mind.
No, that's one I can actually talk about. She was terrible. She was a tyrant. She was awful to her
God.
people. She had people fired, whatever. Remind me of that so I can get back to that, because there's a mea culpa. So anyway, it was the hottest ticket in the world. So I became the ticket guy. Someone decided I should be the one in charge of the tickets for
Oh, wow.
For
That's
Rosie
a powerful
O'Donnell.
position.
I was
Somebody
trading these
decided.
things for everything under the sun. Front row seats at the producers. I was like a concierge, just getting the executives at NBC would call me and ask me to get tickets for Rosie O'Donnell's show. High level people. Her brother once called me, who Larry knows, and asked me to get them tickets.
To his sister's show.
Yes.
Did she not want him at the show?
She didn't. He didn't want to bother her. Yeah. So he bothered.
So he
me.
bothered you.
Yeah, but it was like it was the greatest thing in the world. It was like you had the keys to the kingdom. I only had the job for 2 months, but it was like the greatest thing in the world in the summer of
It's going to go on
1998.
Jeff's tombstone. It's going to be once was the keeper of
Once
Rosie
was the
O'Donnell's
keeper of
Home.
Rosie
Keeper of the
O'Donnell.
castle.
Exactly. So to
That's
get
great.
back to that, she was a tyrant. She was terrible. Later in life at William Morris, I met her, and it was, it's 15 years later, and she acknowledged how horrible she was. She was like,
Oh,
she
interesting.
made your mea culpa, and could not be a nicer person.
Wow. I feel slightly better. So you're giving out Rosie tickets. You're navigating the halls of NBC. When does the moment come that you say, okay, I've been doing this, I've been paying my dues, there's got to be a little bit more, or is there something else that I want to chase?
Wait, before you answer that question, Jeff, what was the time period we're talking about now? You've done all your experience and stuff. Now you've essentially had your keeper of the castle moment, and then you're going to move forward again. So how long of a time period are we talking about there?
So I was at NBC between paging and producing and whatnot from 96 until May 2000. And in May 2000, so I became a promotions producer. I was working on news and nightly, and I looked around and saw that everyone was in their 40s. Everyone was divorced. Everyone worked 9,000 hours a day. Everyone was miserable. Everybody was waking up. The only people who were married still were people who were married to other people in the same business.
Sure.
Right. So I didn't care about that, but I was kind of looking at my future. I'm like, do I want to be waking up at 4 a.m. listening to NPR, for that next story and trying to figure out how to, produce it for NBC News. But, I had this dilemma because I was basically living a dream. Like I wanted to work at NBC, I've been, and it's NBC. It's the best and the best, and NBC News. So I went to my boss and I said, what else can I do? And so she liked me, so she introduced me to this guy, and his name was Henry Reich. And Henry was he worked for a William Morris agency, and he represented anchors and reporters and on-air personalities. He was the agent for the on-air personalities. And, his client list includes everybody from Joe Scarborough to Lawrence O'Donnell to Jim Cramer he's the best in the business. And I became friendly with him as he would come in and out. And after a while, he turned to me and he said, what do you want to do? And I said, what you do sounds kind of interesting. And he says, well, you seem marginally intelligent. Why don't you come work in our mailroom? And I said, I am marginally intelligent.
Right. So what happened? So this is all right. This is it right here, right? Because you're about to make a leap. We can all feel that happening. And
leap.
how does it happen? How does this transformation occur?
Another friend of Larry's introduced me to someone else where I was at the same time offered a job. This is 99. I'm sorry. This is like late 99, 2000, May of 2000, like around there. And the job was to work for NBC's new web services in San Francisco, which is like one of my favorite cities, making at the time I was, I still wasn't making a ton of dough, but it was making close to 6 figures, car, shares, like the whole thing, moving to San Francisco, which is one of my favorite cities. And I had that on the table. And then I was offered a spot in the William Morris mailroom making $17,500 a year. And it is, I don't know if you guys know what it is or have heard of it, but it is a real, as cool as the Page program is, the William Morris mailroom is it's really the keys to the kingdom.
Really?
It's really, it's harder to get into than Harvard Business School. It is, wow. It is so I don't have the job yet, right? So I was just offered an interview. That's all I was offered. And I just, so I was offered that one job in San Francisco, which is a no-brainer to take. It's a total no-brainer. And I remember I was about to move out of my house. I was still living with my parents. I'm 25. And I said to my father, anyway, I got the interview. I end up getting in. It was like a panel interview. There were like these 6 senior agents of like really famous people. I make it. They offer me the job. I mean, Henry was super helpful. That guy, just, I guess, really went to bat for him.
Right.
And I remember saying to my father, I'm like, okay, this is the job in San Francisco, or I could do this job. And my father, who's a pharmacist in Jersey, he didn't know from the internet, like he didn't know from NBCI or whatever, but he had heard of the William Morris mailroom. And he said, no, you got to take that job.
The one at William Morris.
The one at William Morris. And he says, I said, yeah, Pop, but it means I got to stay home and live with you and Mom. He goes, don't leave me alone with her.
I've met your mom and I understand completely.
There you go. So I took that gig. And, a side note is, have you guys ever heard of NBCI?
No, that's exactly the next question I was going to ask.
Right.
When you talk about inflection points, you chose to go right. You could have gone left.
Yeah, but
we know what happens after you went right. What would have happened if you had made that other decision?
Well, I always say, like, I made the best decision in the world, but who knows? I might have been in Silicon Valley, and I might have met,
That's true.
I might have met Elon Musk. You know what I mean?
You might have created Google.
Why would I be talking to you? Yeah, exactly.
Fair enough.
Jugal. It would have been Jugal.
The Jewish
searching
Google.
for Jews online.
You're in the door.
Exactly.
You're pushing the mail cart, and
you're literally pushing the mail cart.
Are you told beforehand that this is what you're going to be doing for the next 6 months, 12 months, 3 years? Like how long is your sentence going into this?
There is no sentence. Like, it is a sentence without end. So basically, you work pushing a mail cart. So I remember, like, you guys sent me over like a list of hazing and things like that. There's no hazing per se, okay? But you are making very little dough in the most expensive city in the world. And there is no prospect of making more dough because there's no guarantees. It's not like being an intern in a law firm where you start off at a certain level and then you go up. It's got like a 97% attrition rate.
Wow.
So, excuse me. So, you do that for 6 months and then you become a floating assistant, which means you basically, whenever a regular assistant to an agent is not around, you fill in for that day. So after you push a mail cart around, you kind of meet as many people as you can. And you see the craziness that's going on, people yelling at people screaming at people, it's not just like Entourage, but it's a little bit like Entourage.
Right.
Did you ever see the movie Swimming with Sharks?
So Buddy Ackerman was not an agent. He was a producer.
Right.
So we didn't have a guy like that he was based on, who was the guy? He was based on Scott Rudin.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
He was based on him. Where from the outside, you think he's the greatest guy in the world, but when you worked for him or had to work with him, you realize what a crazy person he was. So.
That's part of the paying the dues stuff, too.
Right there.
Yeah. That is the pay.
About,
It is the paying the dues stuff, but 90% of the people were really not like normal people. You had crazies, and they were fun, but they were,
It's the entertainment business. There's going to be crazies.
You've been pushing the mail cart around for a while, and you understand the culture. You're getting a feel. You're a floating agent. Like, when was the moment where you're like, okay, I can do this, and I want to do this, and collectively with that, when did you know that you could do it and that you were the right guy?
Well, I'll let you know on the last part of it.
What made you different? What made you unique from the others that were pushing the carts too?
One of the comedy desks opened up, and honestly, one of the big things that made me different was privilege. I was able to save my dough. I was able to live with my parents. I didn't have to go and take a job making tons of money. I was able to afford to do things, because I'm lucky that I had the backup. so I was able to make very little money. You get on a desk. I got on a desk of a guy named Brian Stern, who was a young agent in the comedy department. And I was his assistant for 3.5 years. And in that 3.5 years, everybody from my mailroom class went. They got jobs on Wall Street. They got jobs for Goldman Sachs. They went and got jobs for studios. They went and got jobs for, they did a whole bunch of different things. Most of them, every one of them who wants to be in the entertainment industry is still in the entertainment industry. But for the most part, they left. They got jobs where you could make dough, and I had thankfully the backup of my parents and the fact that I socked away every dime I made and bought a place, so I was able to do it. So and then so I worked for this guy, and we had this amazing roster of talent. Tons of writers on Saturday Night Live. We worked with Susie Essman from Curb Your Enthusiasm, who was just, getting huge, and Jennifer Hudson, who was in Dreamgirls and blowing up and becoming a star. And there was Samantha Bee, who was on The Daily Show, and then, her now is having her own show. And we were working with all of these amazing young kind of talent coming out of New York. And, we were getting them jobs on TV and launching their television shows and casting and, doing all that. And my, primary area of interest was comedy. So while my boss was getting them television shows, I started booking them in clubs and in theaters and for corporations. And I discovered that the corporations, they asked Willie Sutton, why do you rob banks? And he said, that's where the money is. And I said, these corporations want to have comedians in, especially clean comedians, and they have tons of dough. And, they ask how much someone costs, and you can always say, well, how much do you have? and they would tell me, and I'd give them somebody, correct to put in. And I just started booking all of these, comedians at corporations. And eventually, after 3.5 years of doing this, my boss, who was this wonderful woman, came to me and said, listen, I need your help because I've been going to Whoopi Goldberg's television shows. She hasn't been on the road, and I've been going to her shows all this time, and I have a family. I can't really go anymore. Can you go and be kind of like her guy and cover shows? And I said, sure, because that's what I learned. Always say yes, So I started going on the road with Whoopi in 2002 or 3, and basically have been on the road with her ever since. And it was just because I was the right guy at the right place at the right time. So it's all luck, to answer your question. It's like, just always be there and always say yes. And then the same thing happened with, all of the other comedians we represented. Like, I was just always kind of in the room and there, which was cool. And then one of the fun ones I got to do is I went out to LA when I was just out in the mailroom and I was just starting to do all of this stuff. And we had become friendly, and she introduced me to the comedian that night, who was Mitch Hedberg, who, he's an absolute legend.
Legend.
This is right before he passed away. It was like maybe 3 or 4 weeks before when he was on the show. But it was like, and the second, like, I'm in the room with these like guys who I just like idolize.
Sure.
And I'm like, I want to be in this business. This is fun. This is great, And it's kind of funny because the work is during the day, is sort of during the day, but the real work is like being with these people at night, going to the shows, being with the buyers, being with the comedians. That's the actual job. And you basically just want to be someone they can tolerate.
So all that experience you had doing the behind the scenes jobs, all those desk jobs, that really prepared you then for this portion of, hey, you got to learn how to glad hand people, right?
Pretty much. It's like, I was the world's worst assistant. I was terrible. Larry and I always joke that, I don't know how to use a whiteboard. And
You didn't
it's
know what a
like,
whiteboard was.
I didn't even know
not
what a
just
whiteboard was.
how to
It's
use
true.
it. You didn't
It's
know what
true.
it was.
It's true. It's true. And I was literally terrible at the correspondence, at the writing letters, at the, but the clients loved me, the buyers loved me, and the agents loved me and could always trust me. So even though I was terrible at all of the stuff, you like the actual job, like if you read the job description of all the multitasking and the scheduling and the, all the stuff that's the actual job, I was abysmal. And the one thing I learned is that all of the guys that made it, guys and girls who made it to agent, they were terrible at being an assistant.
Oh, that's interesting.
And the ones that were really good at being assistants are shitty agents.
This is great. This is great. So
God.
talk about the job, because that's key. Like, we're talking about what an amazing accomplishment and what a professional you became, quote unquote professional. And you have to do this job. So are you getting calls from people to book your talent, basically, or are you shopping your talent? And when you make those deals, are they, I'll take any deal for this client, but this one will only do, Radio City Music Hall type of
right.
thing?
So the answer is yes. There are certain clients that, only want to work in a certain spot in a certain place at a certain time for a certain amount of money. And then there's Gilbert Gottfried, where someone calls me and said, Gilbert, I have a job for you. Before I hang the phone up, he's like, oh,
and book me at the Motel 6.
Wait. I got two Gilbert stories that are fun. So
Oh my God.
he was again, legendary comedian that everybody knows. And he's been a William Morris client his entire career. From the time I think he was 16 or 17 when he first got on stage. So he's like in his 60s now.
He's not a young man, right?
No, he's been
But handsome.
Handsome is good. So I'll get to that. So he is notoriously cheap, notoriously cheap. Like if you ever want to have fun, go watch his documentary. He leaves hotels. He has all the hotel soap from every hotel he's been in over the past 45 years. It's amazing. He has every dime he ever made. So I had to, he was playing somewhere and I had to book him in a hotel. And I'm like, Gilbert, where do you want to stay? The Marriott or the Hilton or everything? And he goes, I don't know. Book me in the cheapest place you can where I don't have to sleep with a rifle. Which was great. So my favorite Gilbert story is I'm working at the desk and it's a long day and you work 10-hour days when you're at the desk. You start at 9:30, but you basically work until whenever everybody goes home, and you're working on LA time. So it's, could be 9 o'clock or whatever. So it's late at night. And I get a call. Do you guys remember the Boston Phoenix? They were like the Village Voice of Boston.
Not really.
Not really. No,
Yeah.
don't know.
I've heard of it. Yeah.
But for the purposes of this conversation, I do absolutely.
So I get a call, and they say, are you Gilbert Gottfried's agent? I go, yeah,
Not Who Wants to Know?
I know. I should have said it. I learned later to ask more questions. I was like, oh boy, yes. So they go, well, I'm, so-and-so from the Boston Phoenix, and we just want to let you know that we ran a contest and over all of Greater New England, and we have named Gilbert Gottfried as the least sexy man in the world.
Wow. Who did he run against?
Yeah.
Do you know?
I
Was it a write-in ballot, or were there other contestants?
Evidently, he won going away. I don't know. All right. So I start cracking up. So I go, okay. And he's like, well, we would like to interview him. We'd like to do whatever. So I call Gilbert and I go, well, I have good news and bad news. The good news is you won an award. So I tell him, and he laughs. He thinks this is the funniest thing in the world.
Oh
So he gets interviewed. It gets whatever. He goes on Conan promoting this. He goes on. He's on Stern all the time at the time that he's talking about. Yeah, I got so much booking, so much play out of this. It's crazy. Like he started doing cyber. So anyway, it was a huge, great thing. So cut to the following year. that had all died down, and I forgot about it a little bit. And I get a call from the Boston Phoenix, and hey Jeff, it's so and so. I'm like, oh, how you doing? He's like, well, listen, I have bad news. So anyway, he gives me the information he's going to give me, and then I call Gilbert, and I say, Gilbert, I have also bad news and good news. The bad news is that you didn't win the award for least sexy man in the world. And he goes, oh, that is bad news. And I go, well, the other news is that they've named the award the Gilbert Gottfried least sexy man in the world.
I felt where you were going. I didn't mean to laugh on your punchline.
Right. It will be called this. So again, I got him a new, but
wow,
doing all kind of stuff. But that's just the fun with Gilbert. He's one of those guys who was up for anything.
So Jeff, look, obviously you've had a very fun career thus far.
Up until this moment, yes.
Yeah, it's had its moments. All right, it's had its moments. Fine.
Now everything is up in the air.
Yeah, this is not that moment.
No.
How else, as we begin to, pivot towards giving you your day back, what are some of the other things you've seen along the way that have changed? Like, how has the industry evolved along the way?
That's awesome. That's the awesome part. It hasn't. It's the same business from when William Morris got off the boat in 1898.
Wow.
Like, here's a famous person. Here's a famous person. I would like them to show up somewhere, and then they will get paid for it. Now, how has that changed? Now they do it by Zoom sometimes. Now they might, satellite in. But it's all the same thing. It's literally the same business. And I almost think that aside from that, it's one of those rare disruption-proof businesses, because the disruptions only benefit the person doing it. Like, it's not much of an outside disruption. Like, the only part of it that's like disruptable is, people going directly to talent. But I have now worked with so much talent, and the thing I have learned is they have no interest in that. They want someone to handle things for them. And it's been that way for 120 years. Like, they just don't want to deal with it. It's like you pay for a service,
So if you have one piece of advice, I mean, let's put aside being always available. If you have one piece of advice for someone who
I have
wants to
different
get
advice for you than I would have for the other two guys.
But it's a long, separate, private conversation that we really shouldn't have on the air.
No. There's an adage in the business, which is, you go through four or five stages of a career, which can be in any business, which is like, who the hell is Jeff Lesh? And then get me Jeff Lesh, and then get me a young Jeff Lesh, and then who the hell is Jeff Lesh?
What stage are you at now, Jeffrey?
Right,
where are you?
Would you guys like to buy some supplements?
I'm always looking for a salesman, Jeff.
Exactly.
Someone get me Jeff Lesh.
My advice are that things haven't changed. You always want to be the, oh crap, get me that guy. You always want to be, when someone turns around and they need something, you always want to be the person that can provide them with what they need, even if they don't know they need it. Like, there should never be an instance. The second you're not someone's first phone call, then it starts to fade. Like, you want to be the person they call for the advice. You want to be the person that they call for the biggest thing to the smallest thing. And if you're that person, you'll always be in demand.
Interesting.
And that's kind of how I would say it. You just you want to be that guy.
And I guess
like if your friend calls you and says he wants to interview you for a radio, you want to
say
sure.
Yes. the question I'll end on: if there is somebody out there who is 19, 20 years old and they're trying to figure out what their path is going ahead, would you recommend that they give it a shot? And how would you recommend that they get started?
Okay. I saw, again, attrition rate of 99%. So many, 1,000 people came, walked in front of me with a mail card and then went to do something else, or worked with me at NBC and then went to do something else. It's really a perseverance game. and you have to have the wherewithal and backing of, understanding family. We had Harvard lawyers come in, people who went to Harvard Law School, and they would last 3 months.
Wow.
They would last 3 months, and they'd walk in. Anybody Ivy League, anybody who wants to go into the entertainment business who went to an Ivy League school, I'm like, get out of here. Just go away. It's an industry of C students. It really is. It's an industry of really people who love entertainment but did crappy in school. Go do something. If you are an Ivy League person with an unbelievable pedigree who busted his butt, no matter where you were from, if you end up in the entertainment business, you failed. You should be out changing the world. I really believe that. Give me a girl from a state school who was a C student who busted her ass over someone from a well-known college any day of the week.
Wow.
Because that's not the skill set. It's not the skill set. You want someone who's willing to bust their ass. You want somebody who's willing to put clients first above all else. And be a relationship person who, is someone that you want to high five at midnight after, at a comedy show. You don't want, it's not for everybody. And the money doesn't come until deep into it, as opposed to other, there's other perks. I mean, you get 2 weeks off at Christmas and, the whole industry shuts down and, Larry always makes fun of me that I spend the month of December in Europe.
Well, you do.
Right, I do. No, that's true.
And you go to work at 10, and you leave at 4, and you read the New York Times from 1 until 3.
I do. It's all true. But, and the perks are you're at, I'll get a call from the head of music, say, meet me at my box at Madison Square Garden. We're going to the Rihanna concert tonight, or we're going to the Tom Petty concert. May he rest in peace. But, all of that happens. The perks are the fun of the job. There is not a financial reward for much longer than other high-profile jobs, if that makes sense.
So I guess the takeaway is hustle, perseverance, find a way to get to that door, but in the end, it is absolutely worth it.
Sure.
To put words into your mouth. It feels like that's what you're saying.
I have had nothing but fun, and if I didn't do all of these things, I never would have met you guys.
Right.
So,
which is special.
That's part of it too. But wait a minute, if I didn't do all of those things, I wouldn't have met you guys.
I was about to say the same thing.
Well, with that, Jeffrey, thank you for spending time with us today. I've had the pleasure of knowing you for a long time. I know your story is a very interesting one, and hopefully for everybody else, they appreciated you and appreciate you just as much as I do. So,
what a sweet guy.
With that,
he's a sweetheart. He is.
Jeff.
He is a sweetheart. You guys should work with him on a radio show.
We'll get right on that.
We'll try the podcasting thing first.
Perfect.
Or something like that. Jeff, thank you so much for calling in.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right,
appreciate it.
Well, that was my friend Jeff, as, again, you guys knew him previously, but his inside stories and a lot of the stuff that he ran through, I knew those stories, so I may have cheated a little bit in terms of pushing the conversation in certain ways. But, what did you think, Larry? What were your thoughts?
I think when I hear Jeff tell these stories, it's about that one little thing, right? That one little break, and then it starts the long and winding road from one thing leading to another. And I think the most important things Jeff talks about in this interview are just being the person that everybody needs, right? That is such an important thing, is to be the person that people are like, where is Jeff Lesh? Get me Jeff Lesh, right? I mean, that's just the most important thing I take out of this interview.
Who the hell is Jeff Lesh?
Who the hell is Jeff Lesh? Right. That was a, great story because, I think that's what it's about. I mean, I look at today's, young workforce, people who are trying to find their dream job. That's really who we're trying to reach here. And I just say to myself, do they know how to get that opportunity? And when that opportunity presents, do they know how to take advantage of it? And I think that's the one thing that we've, all been able to do in our careers. And I'm hoping that people do it today. And the other thing I want to mention about the interview, which is fascinating, is Jeff talks about the opportunity of privilege, right? That he was given the opportunity because he had the support of his family to go and pursue these things. And I think that's important, but I don't think it should be a detriment when you're going after your dreams, because if you want it bad enough, like Jeff said, just keep going after it. You got to want it. And if you don't want it, that's fine too. You can go find something else to do. But Jeff really took the bull by the horns when it was presented to him. And I think that's fascinating.
And the one thing I'll pick up on that is say that not only did he pick up on the opportunities that he had, but he had fun with them as well. That's an important part of any career that you have, right? So it shouldn't simply be a matter of, you're going there for a paycheck, etc. Part of it should be, you love what you're doing. And he loves what he does. It oozes out of every statement he makes, which is why I love having conversations with him. He's such a great storyteller, but he knows how to tell a joke, and he knows that he's having fun, and he understands that, he's a guy who's had a lot of opportunity come his way, and he's taken advantage of that opportunity. But most of all, he's had a great deal of fun getting to know the people he works with, which is basically what you're going to do, right? I mean, if you're not going to have fun in what you do, why do it?
Yes,
Absolutely.
Gotta love what you do.
Yeah, and the other thing that I'll share is, Jeff is very entertaining. I make fun of him all the time that he works from 10 until 3 with 2 hours for lunch and plenty of time for the New York Times, but. Jeff is a really good person, and he made a comment about integrity and things of that nature. And the thing that I'll express is, I think you have to have a little bit of ego to step into, any competitive environment where you have to, have the strength to persevere and push through, et cetera, et cetera. But moving beyond, that little bit that you have to have, he really doesn't have much beyond that, meaning he doesn't take things too seriously. He rolls with things as, they come his way. And, I think his demeanor of being somebody who kind of rolls with it all the time in every walk of life has been incredibly, incredibly helpful to him. So he's just genuinely a good guy.
Yeah, and that matters with relationships, which we saw in all of his stories, right? Is that it's all about, I knew this guy and they told me about this job. And so when you talk about being a good guy, you can't emphasize that enough, right? Totally. It's about getting along with people, because most of the jobs I've received, have come from word of mouth, a buddy telling a buddy, and someone getting it to me.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just how life works. So you got to be a good person, even when no one's looking, and opportunity will hopefully present itself.
That's exactly right. And he is that guy where I would have parties and I'd be worried about there are all these different groups coming together in different factions, and this one likes this and this one likes that. Is everybody going to get along? When I would have parties like that, the first person I would call is Jeff and say, Jeff, you need to come work the room, and he's a freaking genius when it comes to that.
He's a glue guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy to have at a party,
guy.
For sure.
So he is doing exactly what he should be doing for a living and loving every single second of it. So
easy for you to say.
Yeah, exactly. I'm tired. It was a long conversation. I'm worn out already. So with that, our thanks go out to Jeff for sharing his story with us, and to all of you for joining this episode of No Wrong Choices. We post about once a week, so please follow us here or on Twitter and Instagram at TheFellasNWC. You can also check out our website at NoWrongChoices.com for additional and classic content. Until next time, remember, there are no wrong choices. We learn from every experience.